Hello, and welcome to another session of Excel Programming for Clinicians with me, Dolotson Callum. In this session, we will look at comparison operators. Now, this is a topic that you may already be familiar with, and so this is mainly about showing you the notations we use for these in Excel VBA Programming. We will cover the equal to operator and a not equal to operator. Then we will look at the greater than and the less than operators. Finally, we will look at the greater than or equal to and the less than or equal to operators. Okay, so to illustrate how we use these comparison operators, we're going to use the scenario of patients waiting to be added onto the kidney transplant waiting list. So ideally, you want to be monitoring your patient's declining kidney function over time, and just before they get to the point where they need dialysis, you want to be able to add them to the transplant waiting list. If you can do that, then you can say you've managed to add them preemptively. So through these scenarios, we're going to use the comparison operators to check to see if our patient has been added preemptively. Let's start with the equal to operator. Okay, so let's declare some variables. Let's declare a variable for preemptive, and we'll declare this as a Boolean. So this will return the result of our check as to whether or not the patient has been listed preemptively. Let's declare another variable for date on dialysis. And finally, let's declare another variable for date on transplant waiting list. Okay, let's set some values. Date on dialysis. Let's say a patient went on dialysis on 2nd of February 2018. Let's write that out to Excel. Okay, let's say we managed to add them to the transplant waiting list on the same day. So just about preemptively. Let's write that out to Excel as well. Finally, let's use our equal to operator and check to see if date on dialysis is equal to date on transplant waiting list. And if it is, then we say that they were preemptive. So preemptive is equal to date on dialysis. Is this equal to date on transplant waiting list? So we're checking to see if preemptive is equal to whether date on dialysis is equal to date on transplant waiting list. If they're equal, that will be equal to true, and we can say it was preemptive. If they're not equal, then this will be equal to false, and we can say that they are not preemptive. Let's write our results out to Excel. Okay, let's run the code and see what we get. Okay, so here, date on dialysis is the 2nd of February, date on transplant waiting list is also the 2nd of February, so we just about managed to list them on the transplant waiting list as they start dialysis, so we can say that it is preemptive. What happens if we started dialysis long before we got onto the transplant waiting list? Let's comment out this code, copy and paste it below, and let's change some dates. Let's say they started dialysis on 2nd of February 2018, but we didn't get them onto the transplant waiting list until 2019. What do you expect to happen now when we compare date on dialysis to date on transplant waiting list? They will no longer be equal, so preemptive will now be equal to false. Let's run that code and see if that's correct. And as you can see, They started dialysis a year before we got them onto the transplant waiting list, so we didn't manage to list them preemptively, so preemptive equals false. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're looking at this and you're saying, well, hang on a minute. If the transplant waiting list happened any other day other than the date of dialysis, then preemptive in this situation will be false. So equal to is not a good comparison to see if the waiting list addition was actually preemptive. So let's see how we can improve on our code. To do that, let's look at the not equal to operator. We'll use the same variables, so I'll copy them down into the not equal to sub. I'll set the date on dialysis to also equal 2nd of February 2018, and I'll write that to Excel, this time to C16. I'll copy the date on transplant waiting list, and I'll also set it to 2nd of February and write that out to Excel. So this time, let's say it is preemptive if date on dialysis is not equal to date on transplant waiting list. And you can see the not equal to operator as we write it out in Excel VBA Programming. Let's write it out to Excel. So here we're saying if the date on dialysis is not equal to the date on the transplant waiting list, then it is preemptive. Of course, at the moment, we're setting both dates to be the same, so it will be equal. Let's run this and see what we get. As you can see, when both dates are equal, preemptive equals to false. So let's see what happens if both dates are not equal. Let's copy this code, comment it out and paste it below. And let's change it so that the date on dialysis is after the date listed on transplant waiting list. Let's run this code and see what happens. Okay, so our comparison did exactly what we expected. If the date on dialysis is not equal to the date listed on transplant waiting list, then preemptive is equal to true. Okay, so we've demonstrated how to use the not equal to sign. However, in our search to try to get preemptive to work correctly, you're probably thinking this code still doesn't work. If the date listed on transplant waiting list is after the date on dialysis, it will still say preemptive is equal to true because it's not equal to date on dialysis. So we're still searching for a good way to determine whether the patient was listed preemptively. To do that, let's take a look at the greater than or less than operator. We're going to need these same variables, so let's copy them down into the greater than or less than sub. Let's use the same code we used before, but this time we'll write to row 17. Let's test greater than. So here we're saying if the date on dialysis is greater than the date listed on the transplant waiting list, then we've managed to list the patient preemptively. Let's run this code and see what happens. Great. So for the first time, we now have code that looks like it does exactly what we want. If the patient goes onto the transplant waiting list before they start dialysis, then they are listed preemptively. Of course, instead of testing greater than, we can also test less than. Let's copy this code and comment it out and write it this way. we will test whether the transplant waiting list is less than date on dialysis. So if transplant waiting list is less than date on dialysis, then preemptive should still be true. Let's run this code and see what happens. And the less than operator works as well. The key thing is the order in which you test the values. Now this code is much better than our equal to operator test, and it's much better than our not equal to operator test. But of course, if the dates are the same, date on transplant waiting list and date on dialysis, then this code will not work. To get the code working exactly the way we want, we need to test our final operator. Let's take a look at the greater than or equal to and the less than or equal to operators. Let's copy this code and paste it in the sub below. We will start with date on dialysis as February 2019 and date on transplant waiting list as February 2018. And what we want to test is that the date on dialysis is greater than or equal to date on transplant waiting list. The way we do that is use the greater than or equal to operator. In this case, if the date on dialysis is the same as date on transplant waiting list or is later than date on transplant waiting list, then the listing is truly preemptive. Before we run the code, let's change to row 18. Let's test this code and see what happens. And as expected, because the date listed on transplant waiting list is earlier than the date on dialysis, preemptive is true. Now, of course, if both dates are the same, preemptive will still be equal to true. Now we have a test that truly calculates preemptive. As with the greater than and the less than operators, we can write this code out the other way around. So if I copy this and paste it below, we can test that date on transplant waiting list is less than or equal to date on dialysis. Let's do this run and see what it looks like. And that works as well. So in this exercise, we've seen how to use the equal to, the not equal to, the less than and greater than, and the less than or equal to, and greater than or equal to operators. And we've seen how we can build up our logic to test whether or not our patient is listed preemptively. Now you can use these operators in combination or individually to test out any logic. So now that we know how to use our Boolean operators and we know how to use our comparison operators, we are now ready to start writing some code that solves some problems and automates some processes. I'll see you in the next video.